On our family trip, my in-laws made me sit alone. No one spoke to me, not once. I asked my husband why. He just said, "That's how they are." I smiled and replied, "Good. I've got my way too." The next morning, they realized what I did. And that's when the panic really began. Looking back, the signs were always there, the subtle jabs, the cold glances, the way I was treated like a footnote in my own marriage. But I ignored it because I loved Mark. I hoped patience would fix it. It didn't. That trip to Monterey Bay changed everything forever. I should have known the moment we arrived in Monterey Bay. The California sun glittered across the waves, the kind of place you'd see in a retirement magazine, quiet, serene, charming. But the moment I stepped out of the rental car, I felt it, that invisible chill. Not from the ocean breeze, but from the way they looked at me. The way he didn't. This was supposed to be a relaxing family vacation, a rare getaway before the holidays. My husband, James, had been talking it up for weeks. My parents can't wait to spend time with us. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe, just once, that maybe, just maybe, his family would stop treating me like an outsider. I'm 42. James is 45. We've been married 8 years. I've smiled through every birthday dinner, every accidental family group photo I wasn't included in, every joke I wasn't invited to laugh at. His parents, Thomas and Claire, never approved of me. I was too opinionated, too direct, not elegant enough, Claire's words, not mine. I came from a working-class family. They came from 3 generations of Ivy League dinners and matching monogrammed napkins. Still, I tried. I showed up with wine. I offered to help with dishes. I laughed at Thomas's recycled jokes about politics. And I told myself over and over, they'll warm up. Someday. But someday never came. The first night in Monterey, we went to a seaside restaurant. The kind with dim lights, vintage jazz, and linen tablecloths. The waiter smiled as he led our group to a long, polished oak table with 10 place settings. As I moved to sit beside James, his father raised a hand. "There must be some mistake," Thomas said. "She'll need her own table." I thought he meant someone else. I blinked, waiting for someone to correct him. Claire didn't even look up from the wine list. "It's just how we do things," she said, matter-of-factly. I looked at James. My husband. The man who promised to protect me. He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and said, "It's just their way." Their way. As if I was a stranger they were doing a favor by tolerating. Not a daughter-in-law. Not family. So I sat alone. At a small table 2 feet away from theirs, like a kid in timeout. I picked at my salad, smiled when the waiter cracked jokes, and pretended my stomach wasn't turning over itself. The next morning, I woke early and dressed carefully. Maybe last night was a weird tradition. Maybe breakfast would be normal. I made my way to the hotel dining room, scanning the tables. They weren't there. I texted James, "Where are you guys?" No reply. After wandering for nearly half an hour, I found them seated at a table in the back corner, mid-breakfast, mid-laugh. Like I didn't exist. "Why didn't you tell me you came down?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Thomas barely looked up. "We figured you'd figure it out." Claire, with her usual smirk, added, "It's just how we do things." James? He didn't look at me. He just kept eating. That moment was the crack. The quiet shift in the air when something inside you breaks. I realized, not for the first time, I didn't belong here. I never had. The rest of the trip followed the same script. Lunches, dinners, wine tastings, boat rides, all planned, none of them shared with me. I found out about a private tour when I saw them dressed up in the lobby. A vineyard visit showed up later in their Instagram stories. When I confronted James, he sighed. "You could have asked. You know how they are." That was the last straw. By day 4, I stopped asking. Stopped pretending. They wanted me invisible? Fine. But what they didn't know was, I was done waiting. I wasn't going to play nice anymore. Not for Claire. Not for Thomas. Not even for James. Because maybe they had their way. But I had mine. And by the next morning, they'd know exactly what that meant. I sat there on the balcony, the ocean stretching endlessly in front of me, the breeze brushing against my skin like something alive, something real. In that moment, I felt, not happy, not yet, but weightless. Like I had finally dropped a suitcase I didn't realize I had been carrying for years. My phone buzzed again. Another call from James. I didn't answer. He had always been good at pretending. Pretending not to notice the way I was treated. Pretending it was harmless. Pretending that silence was neutrality, but silence, I had learned, is complicity. And now, for the first time, he was the one waiting in silence. It wasn't until later that afternoon that curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on, just to see. Just to feel the full weight of what I already knew was coming. 15 missed calls. Dozens of texts. From James. From Claire. From Thomas. A few from numbers I didn't recognize, probably hotel staff or cousins pulled into the chaos. The messages read like panic. Where are you? Come back. This isn't funny. You stranded us. We have nowhere to stay. We had plans. Claire's furious. She was humiliated at the spa. Thomas is livid about the dinner. We're Ubering everywhere. Do you know how expensive this is? I read them slowly, savoring every word like a fine wine. Then my phone rang again. This time, I picked up. Where the hell are you? James snapped the second I answered. Carmel, I replied, my voice calm, steady. A beat of silence. Carmel? He sounded disoriented, like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Yes, I said. Enjoying the ocean. It's peaceful here. I could hear Claire yelling in the background, her voice sharp, shrill, unraveling. Thomas was muttering something, probably curses. James's breathing grew more ragged. You canceled everything? His voice was lower now. Disbelief threaded through every word. Yes, I said again. Clear. Precise. He sucked in a breath. Do you have any idea what you've done? Oh, I said lightly, I do. It must be terribly uncomfortable. To be excluded. Forgotten. Left out of plans. He didn't respond. I smiled into the silence. You all wanted me to be separate. So I gave you what you wanted. This is insane, he snapped. You need to come back. I laughed, not a cruel laugh, but the laugh of someone who had finally stepped outside the storm. No, James. I really don't. And I hung up. For a while, I just sat there. Listening to the waves. Letting the echoes of their panic wash over me like distant thunder. I had always been the one accommodating, smoothing things over, folding myself smaller and smaller to fit into a family that never left me space. But now? Now they were the ones scrambling. For the first time, they were the outsiders. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was from a name I didn't expect. Elena. James's cousin. Hey, the message read. I heard what happened. Honestly? Good for you. I blinked, reading it twice. Elena and I had always been cordial, pleasant even, but we were never close. I replied, cautiously. What do you mean? Her answer landed like a punch to the stomach. They did the same thing to James's first wife. I froze. I hadn't even known James had a first wife. He had told me his last relationship ended years before me, nothing serious, nothing worth talking about. But now. They took her on a family trip. Treated her like a ghost. Made her sit at a separate table. Ignored her the entire time. She left halfway through and filed for divorce a month later. I sat up straighter, the ocean forgotten. My hands trembled. My skin felt cold. I figured you knew, Elena added. But seeing how they treated you. I realized he never told you, did he? No. No, he hadn't. And just like that, the betrayal deepened. He knew. He knew exactly how they'd treat me, and he let it happen anyway. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. My mind was racing, looping through every moment, every silence, every shrug, every smile that masked something rotten underneath. And underneath it all, one realization pulsed, hot and steady in my chest. He was never on my side. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not even with the sound of the ocean just outside my window, lapping rhythmically like a lullaby. I lay there, stiff and still, staring up at the ceiling of my hotel suite in Carmel, my thoughts spinning like wheels on ice. James had known. He knew. Elena's message had shattered whatever illusion I still held on to. He had been married before, a detail he had brushed aside as if it were irrelevant. But now I knew, he hadn't just been married. He had watched his first wife be humiliated, isolated, and broken by his family, and he had stood by. Just like he had with me. I stared at my phone, rereading Elena's message again and again. She left halfway through the trip. Filed for divorce a month later. Had he told me that, I would have never gone. I would have known. This wasn't just their way. It was a tradition. A family ritual designed to test, to degrade, to control. And James, my husband, had let it happen again. On purpose. Silently. The longer I sat with that realization, the heavier it became. Like a lead weight in my chest. I couldn't let it go. I needed more. I needed the truth, all of it. So I opened Facebook and typed in her name, Rachel. James's ex-wife. Her profile was private, but I found her sister, Lauren. Her posts were public. I scrolled, slowly, carefully. A post from 2 years ago caught my eye. It was a picture of Rachel holding a suitcase, standing in front of an apartment. The caption read, "Never let a man's family convince you that you're less than you are." My sister deserved better. We all tried to warn her. My stomach twisted. I scrolled further. In the comments was a name I now knew too well, Elena. At least she's free now. I wish she had listened to us. I sat there for a long time, gripping my phone, debating. Then I took a deep breath and typed. "Hi, Lauren. This is going to sound strange, but I think we need to talk." She replied within minutes. "I've been wondering when you'd reach out." That one sentence hit me like a punch. I sat upright, hands shaking. "So you know who I am?" "Yeah," she answered. "We've been waiting for this to happen." "We?" I hesitated, then asked. "What do you mean?" Lauren didn't sugarcoat it. Rachel wasn't the first. And she wasn't the last. James's family has done this more than once. And he always lets it happen. I felt like I couldn't breathe. They don't see partners as people. Just obstacles. Women who don't belong. And James? He just follows along. Every time. I was silent. Frozen. My whole marriage flashed through my mind every time James told me I was overreacting, that I should let it go, that it was just how they are. He knew it wasn't normal. He just didn't care. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. Lauren answered quickly. Because he makes sure his partners stay isolated. He tells them not to ask too many questions. He paints the last woman as difficult. Let me guess, he told you Rachel was dramatic? That she didn't get along with his family? I swallowed hard. He had. He really had. That was the moment something inside me locked into place. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. Done being polite. Done giving the benefit of the doubt. Done being the woman who waited for someone else to do the right thing. If James had lied about this, what else had he lied about? Why was he suddenly so desperate now? And that's when my phone buzzed again. A new text. Unknown number. "Ma'am, this is Officer Daniels with the Carmel Police Department. Your husband filed a missing persons report. We need to confirm your safety." My blood ran cold. I called back immediately. "I'm fine," I blurted out. "I'm not missing." The officer's tone was professional, but firm. "Your husband claimed you left without explanation. That you weren't responding to messages. He said he was worried for your safety." No. That wasn't concern. That was control. He was trying to force me back. Through lies. Through the system. "I left on purpose," I said. "I'm safe. I'm in Carmel. And I do not want him contacting me again." There was a pause. Then the officer asked, "Would you like to file a formal request for no contact?" I stared out the window at the endless blue horizon. "Yes," I said softly. "I would." And just like that, the first legal nail was driven into the coffin of my marriage. After I hung up with the officer, I stared at the phone in my hand for what felt like hours. My heart was racing, but it wasn't fear anymore, it was rage, cold and controlled, rising like a tide. James had gone to the police. Filed a report. Pretended I was missing. He lied. Not just to manipulate me, but to create a narrative, one where he was the worried husband, the victim of a runaway wife. And me? I was just supposed to fall in line, call him back, crawl home. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Not after what I'd learned. Not after what I'd survived. I had proof. I had stories. I had Lauren's words, Elena's messages. But most of all, I had clarity. Then the messages from Claire started coming in. You humiliated this family. You made James involve the police. Do you have any idea how this looks? You need to come back and fix this. If you don't, James is going to make things very difficult for you. I froze. That last one wasn't a guilt trip. It was a threat. A warning, or worse, a promise. For so long I had brushed off Claire's passive aggression, her controlling nature, her icy smirks and dismissive jabs. But now, the mask had fallen. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was warfare. And I wasn't going to fight it silently. So I cracked my knuckles, took a breath, and sent one message back. Perfect. Let's make things difficult then. And I got to work. I booked a small conference room in Carmel, neutral ground, but close enough that James and his parents could drive in without excuse. I messaged James and said I wanted to talk, all of us, face to face. I also sent the invitation to Elena. Let them come thinking I was folding. Let them walk in believing I would grovel or beg or apologize. They didn't know me anymore. The next morning, I arrived early. I wore black, not for drama, but for clarity. I wasn't the grieving wife. I was the woman who had buried the version of herself they used to trample on. The room was simple, one long wooden table, bottled water at every seat, and a silence so dense it echoed. I sat at the head, waiting. James walked in first. Jaw clenched, shoulders stiff. Claire and Thomas followed, both tense, Claire's heels clacking sharply across the floor. Elena came in last, quiet but calm, arms folded across her chest. She gave me a nod, not of loyalty, but of respect. James scowled. What is this? I leaned back in my chair, voice cool. A conversation. You've been dying to talk. So let's talk. Thomas scoffed. You think this is funny? No, I said, I think this is pathetic. You play twisted little games with every woman who dares enter this family. And this time, you picked the wrong one. Claire's eyes narrowed. You abandoned us. I laughed, bitter and sharp. That's rich. You spent an entire vacation pretending I didn't exist. And you're shocked I finally gave you what you wanted? James slammed a hand on the back of a chair. You're blowing this out of proportion. That was when I stood, slowly, letting the weight of my words settle before I spoke. I am your wife. Not a stranger. Not some outsider. Your wife. And you let them treat me like nothing. Worse, you knew it would happen. Because it already did. And then, I pulled out my phone, and I placed it face up on the table. Read it. James picked it up. He scrolled. His face drained of color. Elena spoke softly from the corner, she wasn't the first. And now, they knew, I wasn't the last, but I would be the last one to stay silent. James stared at the phone in silence, his thumb hovering above the screen like he didn't know what to do with the truth now that it was staring him in the face. Claire stiffened beside him, eyes darting from the messages to my expression, already calculating how to spin this. Thomas leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, silent for once. This isn't proof of anything, James said weakly, setting the phone down like it burned. I turned to Claire. You sure about that? Because last night, you threatened me. You told me James would make my life difficult if I didn't come back. Claire's mouth snapped shut. Elena let out a low whistle. Wow. James turned to his mother, his voice sharper now. You did what? Claire's tone turned defensive. I was just trying to make her understand. Understand what? James's voice rose. That you've been playing this game for years? That you did the same thing to Rachel? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Claire shot him a warning look, but it was too late. The damage was done. James's jaw twitched. Jesus Christ. I saw it then, the first real crack in his loyalty. The moment where he realized I hadn't been wrong. That maybe, just maybe, I had never been wrong. He looked at me again, this time with uncertainty instead of indignation. I can fix this, he said suddenly, almost desperately. And that was the moment I knew. He didn't want to heal. He didn't want to change. He wanted to fix the optics, patch up the public version of our life so it didn't look so broken from the outside. I exhaled slowly and stood. No, James, I said. You really don't get it, do you? The room went silent. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder. I'm not coming back. That snapped him out of it. Wait, what? You're serious? Elena snorted. Dude, how have you not figured that out by now? Claire's voice rose, shrill. This is ridiculous. You're throwing away your marriage over a misunderstanding. I turned to her, voice cool. No, Claire. You threw it away. You and Thomas, and your sick little tradition of humiliating every woman who dares join this family. And James? He was just too weak to stop it. James reached out like he wanted to grab my arm, but I stepped back. Let's talk about this, he said, his voice nearly breaking. I raised a hand. No. You talk. You excuse. You let them control you. I'm done listening. I turned toward the door. Wait, James called after me. Where are you going? I glanced back one last time. I'm leaving. Claire scoffed. You can't just leave a marriage. I met her eyes, expression unreadable. Watch me. Then I walked out. It took 6 months to finalize the divorce. James tried everything, begging, blaming, even accusing me of being dramatic. But I never looked back. Elena stayed in touch. She told me things fell apart after I left. James confronted his parents for real this time. It wasn't pretty. Thomas called him weak. Claire cried and insisted I'd brainwashed him. And for the first time, James finally saw them for who they really were. But it didn't matter. I was already gone. I moved back to Charleston. Found a new apartment. Reconnected with old friends. And slowly, I started rebuilding. Then, one night, months later, a text came through from an unknown number. I see it now. I'm sorry. James. I stared at it for a long moment, then hit delete. Because for the first time in years, I was free.